in my mind, I was kind of doing another, Last Girl horror film with a tech component to it. I don't think I had made some leap that it was some big, you know, feminist statement.
And I'll probably link this video, but there was a recent interview with James Cameron and Gale Hurd, like within the last 2 weeks or something like that. I caught it just browsing YouTube. And I always like to look for things while I'm driving to work. My ride to work's about 20 minutes. And so are you guys like that? Like if you take your morning commute, do you like to listen to maybe a podcast or just a sweet 20-minute video? So yeah, this was like an interview with them. And I think the interview was maybe 50 minutes or something like that. And it was all about the Terminator because it was the Terminator's 40th anniversary. And one thing that I did not expect that James Cameron brought up, because the whole thing is really about how they really had to rough it to get this thing made. People forget that the Terminator was a very low budget independent film. After all said and done, they made it for $6 million, but the original budget that they were shooting for was about half that.
An amount beyond our imagination, but we thought, maybe 3-4 million, something like that. I mean, we're thinking like a little bit above John Carpenter, Deborah Hill break-in level, with Halloween, but not much beyond that. And it's like, okay, who's going to give, first-time director and, a producer who's working at the Corman level.
I think before they found a studio to make the film, James Cameron and Gale Hurd, they were getting pretty disheartened by the whole experience and thinking maybe this isn't going to happen, right? But they were just so passionate and persistent. And not once, but a couple of times in the interview, James Cameron brings up a major influence that gave him the drive to keep pushing forward with Gale Hurd to make the Terminator. Can you guys guess what that major influence is? And while you're teeing up your answer to that question, because I love getting you guys involved, what is a certain subgenre of horror that the Terminator often gets lumped into? And that kind of for fun, I think it's even kind of created the action slasher. Not created, because you had 10 to Midnight before that. 10 to Midnight might be the first. Let's see. You had Silent Rage with Chuck Norris. That's an action slasher. That one, I believe, came out before Terminator. James Cameron, not once, but a couple of times in the interview, mentioned John Carpenter and Deborah Hill.
We had examples like, obviously Carpenter and Deborah Hill breaking in and slowly incrementally driving their budgets up. And we had other examples like, George Lucas, who hadn't done that much when he did Star Wars and made that film very, very cheaply.
And Halloween. And the fact that they were able to get Halloween off of the ground and up and running, and on such a low budget of $300,000, $320 after all is said and done. He said he found that so inspirational. And that kind of gave him the drive to keep pushing. This can be done. You just got to put in the legwork. And the biggest hurdle was getting the money, raising the money to make the movie. And not only does he mention John Carpenter and Deborah Hill, but he also mentions how the Terminator he doesn't say the word, but he pretty much comes out and says the Terminator was kind of modeled after a slasher movie. And guys, this is a debate that we have all the time with the Terminator, constantly. Is it a slasher movie? And there's some people that they'll die on the hill that it's not a slasher movie, right? Because of the sci-fi elements. But then you got guys like me that are over here saying it pretty much checks most of the slasher boxes. One person going after a target and killing everything that gets in his way, high body count. To me, it's a slasher. But here it is. I think James Cameron putting the debate to bed that the first Terminator is in fact pretty much a slasher movie. He even uses the term last girl, meaning final girl. I was like, wow, why is he saying last girl? But he says Linda Hamilton was pretty much your final girl of the movie.
You know, in my mind, I was kind of doing another, you know, last girl horror film with a tech component to it. So I don't think I had made some leap that it was some big, feminist statement.
You know? And man, guys, I'm going to post the link to that interview. I saved it on my phone too. And man, it was just such a great interview to listen to. Not just the whole, slasher elements and how I went kind of goo goo gaga over mentioning John Carpenter and Deborah Hill, but also just the making of the Terminator. I always love those really low budget movies by directors that went on to do movies like Avatar, $200-300 million movies. You got to start somewhere. And these guys started with super low budget movies. Even before Terminator, he was doing like Piranha 2. So really inspiring stuff. And, being the Halloween fan that I am, boy, did I get a kick out of the interviews. So I'll definitely clip this out. That was cool as hell. Sarah Connor does rock. Big time, Lance. Loved Sarah Connor in the first, and I'll even say this right now, I prefer the first one over the second one, but I think both movies are really great. They're top notch. They're 5 out of 5 movies, but I think just the low budget horror fan in me loves the first one, also because of Brad Fiddel's amazing horror type score. I adore it. And a lot of those horror elements are kind of left by the wayside in the sequel. Just because that's a different story, right?